Welcome to this week's episode of Coffee with the Journalist, brought to you by One Pitch. The guests on our show include some of the most notable journalists from the top US-based publications who cover topics including technology, lifestyle and culture, health, science, consumer products, and business news. We discuss their role, the types of stories they cover, what their inbox looks like, and how they connect with sources. Our guest today is Shayla Love, a senior staff writer for feature stories at Vice. Shayla covers stories about science, health, and the mind. Prior to Vice, she was a news reporting intern at Stat News, as well as a features intern for the Washington Post. During the episode, Shayla shares specifics about her beat and coverage, how she keeps pitches and trending news on her radar, her favorite exercise activity, and more. Let's listen in now.
Welcome, everyone. It is Coffee with a Journalist. Sometimes we actually drink coffee on here, as many of you know, but oftentimes not, especially when we have East Coast people, most of which are in Brooklyn or New York City, which we have today. But real quick, I'm Beck Bamberger. I run BAM, which is an agency that works with all venture-backed, crazy technology companies for the world. And then I also made One Pitch happen. So One Pitch, as you all know, helps journalists with publicists. And we're here to end the bitching about pitching, as we have to do that in our roles as comms marketing folks, as we know. But with me today, not drinking coffee, but definitely water to keep everything going, Shayla Love. She's a senior reporter over at Vice. Welcome, Ms. Shayla.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we're excited. We're going to dump into your inbox in just a second. But as you are a senior reporter, sometimes I think people can get confused or think, oh, let me just pitch anything under the sun. So we'll talk about that in a second. But tell us a little bit about the focus area you have.
Sure. And that's a great point, because almost every reporter that I know and that I work with has kind of a narrow focus of things that they write about, right? We call these beats. And so my beats are focused on health, science, psychology, mental health, and all of the sort of fuzzy areas where those things overlap. So in practice, that means I write a lot about feelings, emotions, how people are feeling, but also the study of those feelings. I write about psychedelics quite a bit. I write about the intersections of philosophy and mental health, history and mental health. And so all of those sort of interdisciplinary areas that regard the mind is basically my beat.
I like it, including, I'm looking at a couple here, but you have something on just LSD, something about masks with how people look different. I feel like yours is a particular area where you go down a rabbit hole, like 20 articles later, you're like, wow, I learned a lot. So that's great. How is your inbox and how do you keep it clean or not, actually?
Yeah, so I am an inbox zero person.
Okay.
Which means that I don't like to have a bunch of unread emails around all the time. This means I'm kind of a obsessive deleter, right? Because I do get a lot of PR pitches. A lot of them are irrelevant to the topics that I write about, but I'm just somebody who can't have that red number on the email app. I can't see that. It makes me crazy. So I'm somebody who really is constantly pruning my inbox, and I use a lot of filters to make sure that the things that I'm looking for can be seen immediately when I want them to be.
Wow. So you're on the other side of the spectrum. Today, I also recorded with Rebecca Jennings, who's at Vox, and she is the crown winner, 70,000 unread emails or something that I don't even forgot the number of it. But wow. So then you have the opposite side of the spectrum where it's like ruthless, get to zero. How often does it get to zero, by the way?
So right now, I just pulled it up. Right now I have 2 unread emails.
2?
Which came in within the last 3 minutes.
Okay.
And so I do get a lot of emails every day. I wish I could present this as something noble, but instead it just really irritates me to have a bunch of emails. So it's really almost like a flaw that I must always be in there pruning. Like, it's like an obsessive, like gardener always trimming the hedges.
Yes.
So right now I have 2. One is like an internal email, and then one is, it looks like a press release thing. I will probably delete both of them.
I'm on your page. I'm the same. I'm constantly in there, clipping away, because a lot of it's junk, and then a lot of it, I don't have to do anything about it. So yeah, I feel you on that. Are there ever pitches you receive that you respond to?
Yes.
Okay.
It is rare, but I will say the ones that I've responded to are press people or comms people, sometimes at academic institutions, who know my work really, really well. And they either know I've written about a subject before, and this is kind of like a follow-up to a piece that I've written before, or it's regarding, let's say, a scientist whose work I've written about before and it's new work of theirs. Those have been the few instances in which it's been like, oh, I'm so happy to know about this, and I'm going to respond right away, and I want to write about it because it's like telling me something that I would have written about if I had come across it on my own. So it does happen.
And then for filing, because you mentioned that just a second ago with keeping your inbox all nice and pruned, do you go back and search things from, 6.5 months ago? A pitch that you're like, oh yeah, that thing.
Oh yeah, definitely. So because I keep my inbox so clean, I think that's one of the benefits of doing so, because everything that's in my inbox is something that I want to be there and that I might want to look at later on. So I don't have to, when I search for like, let's say, psilocybin, which is the psychedelic ingredient in mushrooms, I'm not going to get a bunch of like nonsense. It's going to be everything about psilocybin that was important to me. And so then I can go back and look at it if I need to.
So a lot of people do that, by the way, use their own inbox as their personal Google of sorts for finding the sources, for finding stuff. And many people have told me on this show that, yeah, something from 8.5 months ago, they dig up and go, oh, hey, by the way, I'm doing something now. Can I use that? Or you think, I think that's great. We've also talked on here, oh, maybe people should use tags in their pitches so they have it at the bottom. But anyway, that's another story or thought on that. What inspires you to do a story?
Yeah, so I'm a features writer, which means that generally I'm not writing news, right? So I don't write about, I'm not writing about the fact that something just happened. I'm usually synthesizing a lot of different ideas together, or it's like a topic that I think is really important for people who are interested in that field to know about. And so for me, a story idea is really kind of this coming together of many different things happening, and in a way where I'm like, oh, there's a bigger picture here. So a good example might be my psychedelic coverage, right? So there is a big for-profit industry popping up with psychedelics. A lot of psychedelic patents are being filed. This is something that I've been writing about quite extensively. So for me, I can't write a news article every single time there's a new psychedelic patent filed. There's like thousands of them. Also, that would be a very boring story. There are like sort of news feeds for information like that. For me, I can synthesize a bunch of different events where patents are being challenged, where people are asking questions about patents, all into one story that has sort of an overarching theme. And so for me, it's always about finding that overarching theme and like that narrative within a bunch of events that are happening out in the world. And that's kind of how I think about the framework for a story that I'm going to approach.
Do you ever find too, I've heard this from people, that they'll just be looking at their inbox and in a week's time, there will be 6 emails, 6 pitches that are about something that's on this particular topic. And they'll go, oh, maybe there's a trend going, or maybe there's something here, and that the collective of the pitches informs an interest, if that makes sense. Do you ever find that? Does that happen at all? Are people sending you mushroom ideas?
Yeah, I mean, since writing about psychedelics, I get a lot of psychedelic PR pitches.
I'm sure.
The tricky thing for me is that when they come from for-profit companies, even though they're saying something really cool is happening, of course they're saying that about their own company.
Of course.
So, right. So there's always something for me where it's like, it's not my job to be a publicist for somebody else.
Exactly.
So I'm always trying to look underneath sort of like the promotional piece of it to think, what's sort of the underlying thread there? So for me, it might be looking at my inbox and being, wow, like 5 people are telling me that they are pushing through patents for psilocybin for obesity this week. That's whether or not that's great or works or whatever is sort of a side note, but I can think this is something a lot of companies are pursuing. So maybe that's a topic that I'll write about generally if I'm seeing that a lot of people are doing that.
And then do you, again, because you get to be in the space of non-breaking news, you can go into these like in-depth rabbit holes of topics. Do you have a process that you do like, oh, my weekly Friday walk, or when I'm in the shower in the evenings, or I get my coffee and like, ding, story ideas come to you in any way?
It's sort of all of the above. I do try to take a walk every morning. Even when I don't feel like it, I force myself out the door kind of the second that I wake up. And I think it just happens kind of naturally. I try to read pretty widely. I try to listen to a lot of things. I've curated my Twitter following to be like people who are doing, in my opinion, really interesting work, again, interdisciplinary in the fields of like neuroscience, mental health, philosophy, psychology, stuff like that. And I try to read the work of my peers, because sometimes fellow journalists write about really fascinating topics and there's a little aside in some paragraph, and then that leads you down a rabbit hole. So, but I think you're right that to have all of that stuff be able to percolate and think on these larger themes and thinking about feature stories, you need downtime. You can't just be constantly frantically waiting for the story to appear. You need time walking around. You need time reading fiction. You need time sort of letting things marinate and seeing the connections between different topics. So I think that that sort of downtime is super important ingredient. And I always try to remind myself that when I'm doing that, if I'm feeling guilty about it, like I'm technically working right now, even if it looks like I'm walking around the park, I am working
deep down at the subconscious level. It's the whole superior athlete or elite athlete thing where you must rest. You must rest to perform great. It's just how it is. So I think, though, that our culture has not promoted that too much. Maybe it's changing. Do you think it is, actually, since you do cover health and wellness? What do you think?
So I just published a story today about leisure time. And
let's look it up. Okay. Yes. Now, how did this piece come about? Oh, it's the hammock piece. Yeah. Too much free time isn't actually bad for you. There we go.
This is a great backstory because...
Let's talk about it.
The reason that the story came to be is for a combination of reasons. So I saw this study in my sort of morning scroll through of the press releases that were embargoed of studies that were going to be coming out. So journalists have access to just sort of like the headline and the abstract of studies that are going to be coming out. I saw this one that was framing it like, if you have more than 5 hours of free time, it's actually bad for your well-being. And I was like,
oh God. Oh,
I was like, that doesn't sound good, because I feel like everyone right now is talking about work-life balance. COVID has really made us reimagine what a working life could be like. We're working from home. We have more flexibility. I always want to have more free time. I love my job, but I also think that it combats burnout, mental health, all this stuff.
Absolutely. Plus also, what does it mean for retired people?
Exactly. Or like, can I never go on vacation again? So I had a lot of questions. Then I looked up the actual study. I saw that the senior author on the paper was, sometimes I call my sources my friends. He's my source. We're very friendly because we've talked a bunch of times before. He's a psychologist that studies how people perceive time and how it affects their mental health and their perceptions of themselves, et cetera. So I was like, there's no way that this study is as simple as this, because my pal, Hal Hirschfield at UCLA, he wouldn't be involved in a study that just said over 5 hours is bad for you. So then I read the study, and it was actually way more interesting and complex than a lot of the other media articles that were being written about it. So all the other headlines that I saw were reflecting the same thing. Too much free time is bad for you. What the study actually said is that you can erase that effect if you use your free time in ways that are meaningful to you. And it actually was inferring that as Americans, and in this culture where productivity and busyness is so valued, we don't really know how to do leisure in meaningful ways to ourselves or in social ways. We think of leisure as just vegging out in front of the TV because we're all so burnt out and we barely have any free time. But if you use your free time to really cultivate your own interests and do things that are meaningful to you, that negative relationship of like the 5 hour cap goes away. So it was really a lesson in how to use our free time in the best way possible and for well-being, which is something that if we strive to one day have like a 4-day work week or universal basic income or any of those things, we're going to have to learn how to do that. So that's how this story came to be. It was a reflection of, I saw the press release, I saw my source that I had talked to before, I saw the other media coverage of it. It didn't feel on the nose to me. And so then I went into, it was quite a long story, about 3,000 words, not only of the study's findings and how nuanced they are, but also about this relationship that Americans have with leisure and how the desire to pin an optimal number reveals how messed up we are about leisure time in the first place, to like try to find the perfect number of free time.
Wow. Good for you digging in. I mean, I know this is what journalists do, but like to go like, wait a second. Cause there's so many, I'm in like this PhD course. And if anything has taught me about this, it is that, never just look at some report or a study, because that's probably not the whole story. It could be, research can be manipulated, stats can be manipulated, findings and headlines and everything can be manipulated, and you got to dig in there. So I love how you did that. So interesting. Ooh, that was great. And so go back real quick. So you originally you were scrolling in your inbox and you saw it. That's how it came about. It was a press release.
Yeah.
Oh, so it came from a pitch, but that wasn't the whole thing, huh?
Exactly.
Interesting.
So in this case, the press release was written probably by either the journal or maybe a PR person at UCLA potentially, but it all comes, it's packaged in Eureka Alert, which is where science journalists get emails about studies that are coming out. But we first read the press release.
Yep. Love it. That was a good story about that. Thank you for sharing.
Today's interview will continue after this brief message brought to you by OnePitch. Are you curious to see the unique ways OnePitch helps PR professionals and marketers pitch journalists? Head to onepitch.co to learn about our new OnePitch score and see how easy it is to find the right journalist to pitch your news to. Sign up for your free account today. Now, back to today's episode.
Okay, Shayla, we are going to play a little fill in the blank portion here. And just tell us the answer, whatever you feel is appropriate. So here we go. My favorite sources, always.
People who are very excited about their work.
Yep. The most annoying sources, always.
People who think everyone is stupider than them.
How does it come across as well?
So I think in that something that I sometimes say to sources is that part of my job as a journalist and advice, we have a lay audience, which just means that our readers aren't necessarily academics, like they're not scientists, they're not doing research. Part of my job is to tell a story about the work that's going on around them and communicate it in a way that's really accessible. That's my job as the translator. But I think it's really helpful to me when the researchers themselves are able to talk about their work in a really down-to-earth way. It's actually very rare, but occasionally somebody will really be resistant in doing that. And it'll be this thing where no, it's for the scientists. And I just feel like that kind of science and psychology, it's for everybody. I think anybody can understand it.
Absolutely.
So that thing of it just it's for us. I've only encountered it a couple of times, but I don't like that.
Yeah, research is holier than thou, and you're not an academic, so no. Okay, you'll get a response from me if
you've read my work and you've personalized your email to me.
Mm-hmm. You'll never get a response from me if
you send me an email about something I've never written about in my whole life, or it's something where you're trying to get me to push a product.
Ooh, yeah. Do you get a lot of product pushing emails?
So many.
Ah, wow.
And I have never...
I know. I'm like, nothing is on your entire anything of any products.
I think when you write about health in any capacity, it opens you up to that just because there are so many health products out there, but those go straight to the spam box for me.
Mm-hmm. You can follow up with me if
I've responded to you once and said, I'm interested, and then forgot to follow up again.
Mm-hmm. The best compliment I received about my work was?
I got a very nice email today that said that my leisure story captured the nuance really well.
Ooh.
And to me, that's always one of the nicest comments to hear, because I think anything having to do with human health and psychology is so complicated. So for me to be able to capture the nuance and still have it be a really compelling story is one of my favorite compliments to get.
Mm-hmm. My favorite stories to write about are?
My favorite stories are ones that combine different fields. So I've lately been very interested in philosophy, but I love when there's, let's say, experiments done on a philosophical topic, which is called experimental philosophy, or, sometimes psychology can touch on philosophical topics. So I love when there's this interdisciplinary thing where there's this idea that exists in the other field, and then another field is like, let's test that, or let's work with that. I love the overlaps between things. Those are always my favorite stories.
Mm-hmm. My favorite hobby is?
My favorite hobby is, I would say, reading fiction, if that counts as a hobby. I think that counts.
Absolutely.
I didn't read fiction for a while, and I definitely started again in the past couple of years, and I love it a lot. And I also very much love yoga.
Oh, nice. Real quick on the fiction thing, is that because, at least was for me, that it almost felt guilty, like you shouldn't be reading fake stories that didn't happen because that's just silliness.
Yeah, I think also when I started really working full-time as a journalist, there was just so many nonfiction books out there that felt related to my work that I wanted to read. And like you said, it felt like, I only have so many hours of a good reading time per day.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Am I going to read this like new, really important nonfiction science book, or am I going to read like a piece of fiction? And so I feel really happy to be at the place where I've sort of shaken that off, and I'm reading predominantly fiction for fun now, though I still read a lot of journalism articles online.
Mm-hmm. That sounds like some good study for somebody. Just the joys, well, not the joy of why read, what does it do for your brain, and what creativity does it spur?
Yeah.
If you sit in fiction and you read, 20 minutes a day fiction, ups your creativity twofold or whatever, one of these types of things. I don't know. I'd be curious to see. Okay. The last song I listened to was?
Oh, that's a tough one. I lately just listened to the Spotify Discover Weekly playlist.
Oh yeah, that's always good.
But then I don't know the names of any of the songs or the artists because I just listen as I'm walking.
Yeah.
And then
that's totally fine. Yeah.
And then when the week changes and the playlist renews, sometimes I'm like, man, I'm never going to get that song again because it just disappears into the void.
Yes, sometimes that happens. Oh, but that is a good list to just reference, because then you're like, what is the world listening to right now? You get to hear all the stuff. Okay. My favorite fall recipe or food is?
My favorite fall recipe is, I think this was a viral recipe last year. I can't remember, but it's very good. It's basically just like a kale chickpea curry stew. I make this all the time. Last year, I'm going to start making it again. Just like a bunch of kale leaves and chickpeas and coconut milk and curry powder and onions. And you just put it in a pot and put the lid on it and then come back and eat it with rice. Delicious.
Sounds good. Pumpkin spice is?
Pumpkin spice is good.
Okay.
Pumpkin spice is good.
We do have some fans here. We do have some fans.
It's weirdly politicized, but it's good.
It's like pumpkin spice, vaccines, same area. I don't understand. My perfect Sunday is?
My perfect Sunday is going to a yoga class in person, RIP, with a friend, and then having a very long breakfast afterwards.
It sounds good. Is coffee included in that?
So I actually don't drink coffee.
You're not a coffee
sacrilege to the title of the podcast, but there would be matcha involved.
There you go. We'll take that. Quarantine has taught me
how to slow down.
Yes.
Before COVID, I traveled a lot. It was just a time period where I wanted to be traveling. I was applying to a lot of different fellowships and conferences, and I was basically going somewhere once a month. I loved it. I think it was great, but I haven't gone anywhere in over a year. And at first it made me really claustrophobic. And now I feel really grateful that I was able to just be still and try doing that. And I think it was really beneficial.
I think a lot of people have realized that. For myself, I have fully accepted that I will never get on the 6:30 a.m. flight to San Francisco from San Diego on a Tuesday ever again, which I would do 2-3 times a month.
Yeah, it's kind of wild when you look back and think how I think about some of the travel like layovers and things I did, and I just think, how did I do that? I can't
Insane, right? Insane. It's weird how you get these realizations with the hard stop and the hard pause on everything, but some of these are the benefits. Okay, Shayla, what are you, speaking of all that fiction you love, reading, watching, we'll take listening, we'll take any storytelling format we want to know. What you got?
So the book that I'm reading now is called Mating, Mating.
Wait, Mating? Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh.
It is a novel from 1991.
Okay.
It won the National Book Award in 1991, and it's beautifully written. I mean, the writing is just blowing me away. I love it so much. It is about a unnamed female anthropologist who is in Africa, and she went there to do her PhD project on how women's health was affected by the seasonal cycles in the food that women ate. And then she found when she got there that her subject was basically non-existent because they ate almost like westernized food. Their diets weren't according to the season. So then she just starts basically wandering aimlessly through Africa as a woman in the 1980s until she meets this very famous American scholar who has created a matriarchal utopian society in Africa as an experiment.
Now, tell us again, who's the author? Because, God, if you look in Audible for the title Mating, there's going to be some interesting titles that come that are not related to this. Tell us again the author?
Yes, his name is Norman Rush.
Oh, Norman Rush. Okay, it is the first thing. Okay, it's a 20-hour. Oh, okay.
It's really good. I'm about 3/4 through it right now. What I find really impressive is that, so the protagonist is a woman. Obviously, the author is a man. I feel like from my perspective, he really gets into the female head space really well. Like sometimes it can be annoying to read a female protagonist written by a man, and I'm not sensing that in this case either. It's a really, I think it's a really funny book. I think it's really smart. It's really intellectual. I saw a negative Amazon review that said you had to look up so many of the words in the dictionary as you're reading.
Yeah, probably not your book.
It's definitely like, it's a very verbose book, but the writing is so beautiful. It's so specific, so detailed. And this matriarchal society, so she just arrived, this is the place that she just arrived here. And it's this social experiment of what it would be like to let women own land and let women run a city. And it's just beautiful. I love it so much. So I'm reading that. I also am reading a piece of nonfiction, which is that I'm rereading Janet Malcolm's Psychoanalysis, The Impossible Profession.
Wait. Okay, wait. We're going too fast because let me put add to wish list. Okay, let's go back to that one. Okay, that one's in my, okay. Say it again.
So it's called Psychoanalysis, The Impossible Profession, and it's by Janet Malcolm, who is an amazing nonfiction writer and journalist. This is essentially a piece of very long journalism. It's about psychoanalysis and kind of the infighting in psychoanalysis, the different theories that people use, just the practice of psychoanalysis in general. I'm rereading it. A friend of mine was reading it for the first time, and I read it for the first time many years ago and wanted to pick it up again. And I think it's a wonderful example of how a journalist can enter into something and really try to have a critical take on it while being fair to all the people that they're talking to and just being really curious while at the same time raising important questions about a field in general.
I like it. Good ones. Thanks, Shayla. Oof, this is why I love this show, because you get to hear all the good stuff. Okay, kind of a hard pivot, but we'll see what happens. What do you think is the future of journalism?
Oh man, I worry about this a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, who isn't worrying about this right now, especially if you're in journalism? Over the last year, journalism is so important. And as a health writer, and as I know many people who report on health and science, you would think that even during a pandemic, with the last presidential election, even the last 4 years with President Trump, like journalism and accountability is so important. And every person who lives their day-to-day life knows you consume so much journalism media. You're always reading articles, we're watching the news, we're listening to podcasts, and yet somehow media corporations can't figure out how to make money, and they're just keeping layoffs, and journalists are so undervalued and underpaid. And so this is something I think about a lot. At Vice, we've had several layoffs in the past 3-4 years. There's been a major layoff at the company every year that I've worked there. I've been luckily unaffected, but I've seen some of my very close friends get laid off. And I always think, why is this happening when this is something we all need and we consume so much? So I think that some real creativity and innovation needs to happen just on the business model side of it. And unfortunately, that is not my skill set, right? I'm a writer, I'm a researcher, I'm a reporter, but I think somebody needs to figure out how to just make this something that's more stable so that the people who want to do this work can just do it. So on the business side, those are my concerns, but just on a personal level, I think that the journalists that I see who are thriving and doing the best work and are also the happiest are the ones who've just sort of embraced authenticity and are writing about the things that truly fascinate them and that they love. So I work on on Motherboard, which is the tech desk at Vice. Everybody who writes there is writing about things that they would be reading and probably writing about anyway, right? So nobody's being forced to go after these topics. Like that leisure study, if I wasn't a journalist at Vice writing about it, I would be at dinner tonight with friends and unable to shut up about it. Like, so I think that just letting people embrace their interests and embrace their authenticity, that's really the way that, you know, everybody resonates with that. And so I think just allowing people to do that in some sort of business model that values that and lets people do it And then I think that gets you away from just being a slave to the content machine, because nobody cares about being forced to write articles that nobody reads because there's not a lot of depth to them, right? I think that people want stuff that people are genuinely interested about and care about.
And that goes into this notion when people have said, oh, this AI will make the article. And I'm like, yeah, for like a 200 word breaking news thing. Okay. But not this 3,000 word piece that brings in context and culture and how are we ever going to get to that with the machine writing that? I'm really hard pressed to believe that.
Yeah. And I even think for breaking news writing, so I have many colleagues who write news, and that's a skill unto itself. And yet still they bring that level of authenticity and interest and expertise and context because, for example, my colleague Carter Sherman, who writes a lot about abortion at Vice News, she could write a 200-word news story about something that happened, but that's building on the years of expertise that she has covered in that area.
All the context.
The context, right? And that's sort of invisible, right? You can't see it immediately, but it's built into anything she writes on that topic. So I think expertise, authenticity, enthusiasm, those are how I see journalism progressing into the future. Like we need to maintain those. It's just really whether the executives can get their act together and like make money. I saw a Wall Street Journal.
With the money part,
I saw a Wall Street Journal article that said the median salary for journalists was $39,000.
No, how is that possible?
See, this is like, I don't know because it's something that I think everybody gets so much value from.
Oh yeah. America, we have problems. It's like teachers. So anyway, that is a whole other rabbit hole to get down into, but thank you for sharing. I hope people are making more than that with all that expertise. Well, on a different note, Shayla, we're going to play our Mad Libs part. So this is now the time for just the one word that you get to slot in. And then we'll read it and we'll see how accurate it is. Sometimes it's just fun and silly. Sometimes it's shockingly accurate. Who knows what we'll get? So let's see. How about an emotion to start off? One emotion.
Envy.
Envy. An adjective.
Spiky.
I like these. This is good. Another adjective.
Sinewy.
Sinewy. We're getting on it today. Okay. A greeting of any kind.
Welcome.
Welcome. A verb.
Jaunt.
Jaunt. Okay. A noun.
Piano. An
adjective.
Coarse.
Coarse. And a cringe-worthy PR term or phrase.
Should I look at my inbox?
Yeah, look real quick.
To find one.
Pick out your favorite of the day.
Groundbreaking.
Oh, God. Horrible. A part of a pitch.
Gifting opportunity.
Gifting opportunity.
It's two words, but.
Yep, no, we'll take it. A length of time.
3 weeks.
3 weeks. A real person, preferably alive.
Anybody?
Anybody. Your mom, Obama, anything.
I'll pick my editor, Tim Marchman.
Tim Marchman. Sounds like a nice guy. An emotion.
Sadness.
Sadness. Okay. Shayla, are you ready? Here we go.
Yes, I'm ready.
Let's do it. When I think of the future of journalism, I feel envious. The pitches I receive have gone from spiky to sinewy. If I receive a pitch that starts with welcome, I jaunt. When I write stories on pianos, I get a little coarse. My favorite pitches include groundbreaking phrases and gifting opportunities galore. I normally take around 3 weeks to respond with my emails, but if it's my editor, I will respond immediately. If you do get a response back from me, you should know I am very sad for you.
Well, I do respond.
I kind of like it.
I do respond to my editor's emails immediately.
There you go. See, accuracy is high on this one. Perhaps. I love it. Shayla, thank you for your lovely book recommendations. This juicy 3,000 plus word piece on leisure time, which now I got to read front to back here. So I'll be doing that for the next 10 minutes. I love it. It's been great having you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to talk.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Coffee with a Journalist featuring Shayla Love from Vice. If you enjoy listening to our show, make sure to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. And if you have a moment, please leave us a review to share your thoughts about the show and today's guest. To learn more about the latest tools on OnePitch and to subscribe to our weekly podcast newsletter, head to our website at onepitch.co. We'll see you all next week with a brand new guest and even more insights about the journalists you want to learn more about. Until then, start great stories.